Hello everybody and welcome to my channel. Thank you all so much for tuning into this week's video. Today we're doing something really fun but really simple. I have been singing the praises of this bread machine ever since I got it last Christmas, okay? It makes the softest, fluffiest, most beautiful, delicious white bread ever without all the preservatives and gunk that's in store-bought white bread. You can just throw the ingredients in here, press a couple buttons, and voila, a couple hours later, you have a beautiful loaf of bread. Well, I've pretty much stuck to white bread ever since I got this machine, just cause like, you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But I wanna expand my horizons today because there are a ton of different breads that I can make. So I'm diving into the recipe book that came with the machine, and we're gonna be making cinnamon/cardamom bread. I'm gonna do cinnamon, but the choice is yours. So I'm gonna make a loaf of that. It should be very, very simple, quick, easy, but I will outline the recipe as I go. So feel free to follow along and make your own loaf of cinnamon bread with me. Let's get started. All right, the first thing we're gonna do is just take out the bread pan, make sure we have our paddle inside. I'm also gonna take out the kitchen scale because that is gonna be very important during this. Place the bread pan on top and then turn on the kitchen scale to zero it out. Now it suggests that the first time you make any sort of loaf, you do the 1.5 pound, but I want a lot of cinnamon bread and I'm gonna measure everything pretty precisely. So I'm jumping straight to the 2 pound loaf, okay? I'm risky, I'm dangerous that way. All right, the first step is to add 320 grams of water. And that is gonna be at room temperature. Very important because of the yeast. All right, we're gonna measure out 320 grams. Then we add 2.5 tablespoons of olive oil. Okay, then 2 tablespoons of white granulated sugar. 1.25 teaspoons of salt, 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon. And then here's where we get into the big numbers. If you're using bread flour, it's gonna be 516 grams of bread flour. I am using all-purpose flour, so it's gonna be 532 grams. Now it also says you can do 4.25 cups, but I just don't trust cup measurements with flour. I always weigh it, so I'm gonna reset my scale just to get everything back to zero, and then add 532 grams. So I'm just gonna loosen it up here and start pouring it in. Now it should completely cover the liquids on the bottom. You shouldn't see any liquids. Okay, we're fine. It was only 429 grams. Perfect, 532 grams. And it's all kind of in a mound. It's all covering the liquid, but it's in a mound. I'm just gonna take a little spatula here and kind of even it out and then create a well in the center of the flour. And that's where our yeast is gonna go, which is our last ingredient in this. And then you'll add 1.5 teaspoons of instant dry yeast into that well in the middle of the flour. Okay, 1.5 teaspoons. Now in this machine, the cinnamon bread is number 10. So I'm just gonna load the bread pan in and click number 10. Okay, it defaults to the 1.5 pound loaf, so I'm going to change it to the 2 pounds. And this will be ready in 3 hours and 37 minutes. I'm just obsessed with this bread machine because it would be so hard for me to like put the yeast in the warm water, let it rise, then make the dough, then let it rise again, then knead the dough and then bake it. This bread machine is like a miracle. I mean, apparently like everyone used to have them and I don't know why they've kind of gone out of style. I feel like they're having a resurgence and I can just see why, because I literally throw everything in, I click a couple buttons, and then I just hit start and it's gonna start doing its whole thing and I will get a loaf of bread in 3.5 hours. So I'm just a huge fan. I will link this bread machine down below, but overall, I just can't recommend it enough. So I'll check in about 3.5 hours and have a little afternoon snack for ourselves. So I'll see you in a little bit. Okay, it is over 3.5 hours later. The bread is all finished. So I'm going to open this up and we're gonna put it on a cooling rack. It's looking really, really good. It did hit the top of the glass just a little bit in one area, but overall it looks really good. Okay, here's what it looks like still in the pan. This is the little area it got stuck on the glass right there, so it's a little bit mushy, but no worries. We'll just probably cut that part off. Okay, we have our cooling rack. Okay, we take this. cinnamon makes this smell so good. I don't think this is gonna be like overly sweet because it's not a ton of sugar, but I think it's just gonna be perfect. And I gotta shake it a little bit. There we go. All right, we just let this cool. We'll see you in a little bit. So I let the bread cool for a couple hours. As you can see, I'm very, very sweaty. I went and exercised a little bit and came back and decided to go to dinner. So I just saran wrapped it, the whole loaf, for the night and then came back to it the next day. This works if you just don't have the time to cut it all up and freeze it right away. But the next day I decided I wanted to make some honey butter, which, you know, I kind of just was winging this, really. I just put a stick of butter, eyed some honey, you know, tasted a little bit, added some more honey, and then just a pinch or two of salt and just whipped that up. So it was a nice like whipped butter consistency. Really, really good. But again, I just was winging it. So if you want to look up a honey butter recipe, there's probably more exacting ones. The next day I took out the bread and I wanted to slice it all up. Now I slice it all at one time and freeze it. So just put it into a couple Ziploc bags, but I wanted a snack for my husband and I, so I kept 2 of the slices out to butter with the honey butter. And look at how amazing that bread looks. Perfectly fluffy, perfectly like spongy, just amazing bread. I love the bread machine. So I toasted it, put the bread on. My husband wanted a little more toasty than I like the bread, so I left his a little longer, but this is what mine looked like. Oh, it was absolutely delicious. Like the little hint of sweet was perfect with the cinnamon, and you know, you could definitely go sweeter on the butter, but I just did like a little hint. But that is all for this week's video. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next week. Bye everyone.